for all the grief that Father Paul gives me for being something of a gamer, which I am also a very avid reader. And as I was looking back through my list of books that I read 31 books this year. Part of that was because of the pandemic, and so I was able to do a good bit of reading. So I thought it would be nice to share the 5 favorite books that I read this last year with all of you. And they're kind of a diverse array of topics and types. I should have an asterisk before I begin, though, because 14 of those books that I read were the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. It's a fantasy series that was written about a decade ago. Well, I mean, really, over the course of a couple of decades. And in fact, he didn't even finish it. He died before the last 2 books were finished, so they were finished by an author named Brandon Sanderson. And I enjoy fantasy because it allows you to imagine what our world could be like if God had made it differently, and to imagine how that impacts our relationships, how that impacts right and wrong, good versus evil. And the Wheel of Time series for me is just outstanding. I read it a number of years ago, all 14 books, and I decided, you know what, this year's a good chance for me to go back and read them all over again with a different perspective now that I'm a priest. And I greatly enjoyed it. Really outstanding books. If you liked J.R.R. Tolkien stuff, you would enjoy the Wheel of Time series if you can commit to 14 books. A friend gave me the first book. I enjoyed it, and he said, "You want the second?" And I read that one, and by that point I was hooked, and I said, "How many are there?" He said, 14. I said, "I hate you." But I did finish them, and they were worth taking the time to read. So if you're interested in a longer read, something more fantastic, so to speak, more of the fantasy realm, that might be a book for you. So with that aside now, let's go down through, and these are not in any particular order, my favorite books from the last year. The first is called Fermat's Enigma by Simon Singh. This book is a math lover's book. It's a bit of a history lesson, if you will. Fermat was a famous mathematician who had said he had a very easy and obvious proof for a particular statement, and then it became very clear after he died, he never wrote that theorem down. And so mathematicians for a long time have been attempting to demonstrate Fermat's last theorem. And finally, someone did it, really in the last, I think, 20, 30 years. And so this book not only chronicles that journey, but it talks about a bit of a history of mathematics. It has a lot of interesting puzzles, math puzzles and riddles throughout the story. It goes back to, the days of the Greek philosophers and, some of the math problems that they encountered and discovered and solved. In that sense, it was a real delight to read. It wasn't just about this one person or these 2 people, the one who claimed to have this proof and the one who ended up actually proving it in the end. It was very charming in a way. For someone who enjoys mathematics, I really, really liked it. There were a couple of times I wanted to hit the pause button and say, I wonder if I can solve this. I wonder if I can figure this out. I usually didn't. I kept reading because I wanted to know the end of the story. So if you love math, this is a good read. You don't have to have a math degree to be able to read it. It's probably helpful to have some basic mathematics knowledge at a higher level, but you don't need to enjoy this book. All you need to do is enjoy math, and I think you'll find it enjoyable. The second book is kind of a series. There were 2 books that were given to me by a parishioner, actually, by Joseph Pearce, Bilbo's Journey and Frodo's Journey. What he does is he looks at J.R.R. Tolkien's work, The Lord of the Rings, and The Hobbit, and the 2 main characters, Bilbo and Frodo. And he looks at them from a philosophical perspective. He imagines, because Tolkien was a Catholic author in a very deep way, and he's looking at how that Catholicism informs the journey that these 2 heroes take and that they make as they sort of, go on a quest. And they encounter troubles and difficulties, and they have to discern right from wrong and make the decisions that they make along the way. And he has a really interesting commentary on how that informs us of how we can live our lives, how our journey of faith and of life is informed by fantasy. Again, that's why I like fantasy. It takes us outside of the political and emotional realms and says, well, imagine if this were the case. What do you think would happen? How would somebody react? And what does that then tell us about our human nature here and now? So if you enjoyed The Lord of the Rings and you want something that maybe analyzes them or thinks of them on a new level, on a deeper level, those would be excellent books that I'd recommend. Number 3 is a Christian classic. It's The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. It's not one of his top 5 works, perhaps, but it's definitely up there. The Four Loves is a book where C.S. Lewis considers that in the Greek language there are 4 words that are used for love. And he takes each one of them and considers them one at a time. He doesn't call one inferior over the other. Just saying that you love pizza versus you love your wife or your husband. We know that there's a different degree in love, and in Greek you would use a different word. But that word can carry meaning for our life with God. Even just when you say you love pizza, that is a good thing. And ultimately, I think he does a wonderful job of connecting those different types of love and not saying one is bad, one is better, but to say they are all good in their proper place. And then how does God elevate them to something even better? So it's a classic. It's another philosophical read. I think you would enjoy it. The Four Loves. Number 4, The Great Train Robbery by Michael Crichton. I like Michael Crichton's work. He is usually a fantasy author. He writes things like Jurassic Park and The Lost World, and some of his other works aren't coming to my mind right now. But I've read a lot of the things that he's written. I think Congo was another one that I enjoyed and read this year, actually. But I remember The Great Train Robbery because this is a nonfiction. It's a historical fiction. This train robbery actually happened in Great Britain, and most British people know about it as a matter of their course of history. But we Americans, I don't remember ever hearing about the Great Train Robbery. It's quite a compelling story. It's incredible how these men concoct this plan to steal this immense amount of money, and they run into problem after problem, and they end up making it happen. It reminds me a little bit of, like, was it Ocean's 11, I think? Some of those movies about, creating a plan and executing it and dealing with the problems that come up. And he's an outstanding storyteller. And it's very well researched. So it's a fun book, but it's also an interesting history lesson of that period of British history. I really enjoy it. I hope he does more of that kind of stuff. If he has, I'm not aware of it, but another good book. Lastly, this was one of the most recent books that I read. The Boy Who Followed His Father into Auschwitz. It's a story about a Jewish family, in particular a father and a son, who endure about 5 years, I think, of time in concentration camps, in various concentration camps, including Auschwitz. And we have records because, first of all, they survived. Very few survived that long. But also, the father kept a secret diary that we have access to, so we know a lot of the details that might have been forgotten over the ages. And he does a wonderful job of incorporating the whole atmosphere, the environment that was taking place, the mindset and the mentality, the emotions that were going on, a lot of the little things that happened in the concentration camps. A lot of the times when I've read stories about life in the concentration camps, first of all, it's a very heavy read. And so you have to be prepared for that. Don't go into it expecting something lighthearted. It is a very serious matter. I couldn't just keep reading it. I had to read a certain amount and then I had to stop. It was just, very emotional, very challenging. And it's uplifting in a way, but it's definitely very solemn. And there's a reverence about reading something like this when you realize what is possible, both from an evil standpoint, but also from a triumphing over evil standpoint. So with that said, it is a very powerful book. I think reading stories from that time and from that experience is very important because it gives us context, again, for the devastating impact that evil has on regular humans. The Germans weren't just regular humans who got caught up in a terrible, terrible evil, but also the ability that men and women had to triumph over that evil, to combat it in whatever way that they could, and to stay spiritually and mentally and emotionally strong during times when it seems nearly impossible. It's a testament to what we can do, even here and now. As difficult as things are, it's a testament to the human will, to the power of someone who doesn't give up. And so this is, it's just a beautiful story, very powerful, very suspenseful. You never know what's going to happen. There are quite a few surprises along the way that I was not expecting. And I learned a good bit. And it's a sobering reality, but perhaps a necessary one for us to be able to appreciate what took place and then what we have now as a result. So these are my book recommendations from 2020. Happy reading, and God bless.